Yo, what's up everybody? It's your boy, Laghima here. So today's tutorial, we're going to be covering some new stuff. We're going to be covering jazz theory, and we're going to be going more in depth with jazz theory. So if you haven't seen my last jazz theory video, I would definitely suggest checking that one out first. It's just going to cover everything much more in depth, the kind of introductory stuff, because I'm going to kind of skip it. And also, if you haven't already, definitely going to make sure to check out my other videos, music theory, such as like the basics of music theory, chords, and all that sort of stuff. It just helps you real quick, that way you don't get confused in this video. But anyways, let's go ahead and get into it. So the most important thing in jazz, besides the 2-5-1 chord progression, is something called the tritone substitution. So the tritone substitution is a essential part of jazz. It literally, I would go further than to say it is jazz. So we're going to talk about what that is first. So what is a tritone before we get into using a substitution of a tritone? So what is a tritone? A tritone is 3 tritones. And we know that already that a semitone is a half step. So from C to C sharp, that's a semitone. So a tone would be C to D. So a tritone would basically be 3 whole steps. So for example, if we take the C major scale, or we take going from C to C, if you count up 6, you'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Because I counted from C, so I counted C as 1. So in reality, it'd really be like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So if you count up 6, you'll land on a G flat, which is also F sharp. So I'll show you right here, real quick. Let's zoom in so you guys can get a good visual. So if we count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, we end up on F sharp. So that tells you is that C and F sharp are a tri-step apart, or a tritone apart. So the reason that's important is that we use something in music theory called a tritone substitution. So how do we actually do that, and what is a tritone substitution? So we're going to actually talk about chords really quickly to kind of establish that point. So any chords you have, the 3rd and the 7th establish majority of the resolution with the chord and dominant chords to be particular, but in general for every chord that's the case. So in this case, as you can see, I have this G major 7th chord, and I have this D flat 7 chord. And so as you can see, the 3rd and the 7th in this chord is also the 7th and the 3rd in this chord. And the reason why is because these 2 chords are actually a tritone apart, or they can be used in a tritone substitution. And so that's the main important thing with jazz, is actually using this relationship of 2 chords that are a tritone apart. To kind of put it in a more practical way, let's look at some chord progressions and actually see how it sounds. So what I'm going to do is show you a couple chord progressions, but the first one is just a basic 2-5-1, just so you can familiarize your ear with the way a normal 2-5-1 sounds. In practice, I'm going to be playing you a 6-2-5-1, but it doesn't really change anything. So anyways, just kind of go over real quick. Here's the 6, here's the 2, here's the 5, here's the 1. And then on the right side over here, I have same chord progression, 6, 2, the tritone substitution, 1. So we're going to give it a listen. I'm going to play the just 6-2-5-1, and then we're going to play the tritone substitution. So where you can hear how the kind of the jazziness comes from. So let's play the basic one first. So as you can hear, that chord progression sounds good. That's just the basic 2-5-1 or 6-2-5-1. I haven't changed anything. All I've really done is just, so as you can see, I basically haven't changed anything. All I've really done is just made everything the 7th chord, which is a really essential part of jazz as well. Don't play basic triads, play really, really beefy triads. So the chord progression I have in front of me is a 6-2-5-1. This is the one on the left side. The one on the right side is a 6-2-5-1, but the 5 has been tritone substituted out for a a D flat 7th chord. So what that does is that's going to give us the jazzy feel that I talked about earlier, because what we're actually doing is using a tritone substitution. So we're going to play the normal one first, and then I compare that with the tritone subchord progression. And then the exact same, only thing I've changed is the 5, which in this case is this chord. And then we'll talk further about how actually voicing it actually helps a lot as well. So anyways, let's give it a listen. So as you can hear, out of the two, the one on the right, so this one over here, is way more jazzier. And the reason why is because I tritone subs out the G major 7th chord. That's what gives it that jazzy feel that we usually hear a lot in jazz music, or that we do hear in jazz music. Because once again, this like literally is jazz, because just this one thing, if you understand this, you'll have a good handle on jazz. So some other things as well with the tritone substitution is, even when you sub the chord in, the major part of making it sound smooth and jazzy is the voicing of it, or what we call voice leading. So what actually is voice leading? Voice leading is what we define as just basically how you play the chord. So you can play it, for instance, a G major chord a couple different ways. You can play it as I've played it in a second inversion, this being my G major chord. You can play it normally, also a choice. You can play it in the third inversion, so forth and so on. But the idea with jazz chords is that you don't want all these melodic jumps. So you want very smooth voicing, or you want as little movement as possible. So imagine when you're making the chord progression that you're actually playing it on the keyboard. And when you do that, you want to move your hands as little as possible to go through the chord progression. So that's why, as you can see here with all my chords, and from chord to chord, there's very little movement. So for example, from this G to F, it's obviously only a whole step. From E to D, a whole step. Then from this chord to that chord, all I do is literally just bring this down a whole step and this down a half step, so forth and so on. So the idea I'm presenting once again is just leading, voice leading. Do really smooth voice leading. Don't have like a super crazy jumpy chord progression with any chord progression in general, but particularly when you're aiming for a jazz style chord progression, it's not looked forward to, or it's not part of the style. Other genres like, trap and future bass and whatever else, that they definitely do that, but in jazz it's just not common. So anyways, let's look at some more chord progressions. So the next one I'm going to actually show you is another one, which is this one right here. So I mentioned that you can do tritone substitution. It's normally done on the 5, but you can actually technically do it on whatever chords you want. It really doesn't matter, as long as the chord you're substituting out for is harmonic. The tritone sub will also be harmonic. So with that being said, the chord progression on the left, so this one over here, is a 6-2-5-1 that we've listened to the first time with nothing changed. The second one is actually a 6-2-5-1 as well, but the 2 has been tritone substituted out. So we're going to give it a listen to both and see how they sound. So, as you can see with that as well, also very nice. If you added higher chord degrees, it obviously sound way more lush. Obviously, since I kept it at 7th, it's going to be very on the more mellow side. But, it depends on what you're going for. But with that being said, the main thing to keep in with the tritone substitution is to use it interestingly. So in this case, I used it on the 2 instead of the 5, which is expected in a 2-5-1. Usually you always tritone substitution the dominant chord. And in this case, since we're in C major, the dominant chord is G. So that's why we do a tritone substitution on the G. But you can technically, like I said, do it on whatever chord you want. That isn't the 1, because that would obviously change the scale. So anyways, with that being said, let's look at another chord progression to give more options of what you can do. So the first one I showed you was tritone substitution on the 5. This one's a tritone substitution on the 2. Now let's check out another one, which is tritone substitution, actually on this 6. So like I mentioned, you can do it on the 2, the 5. You can technically do it on any chords you want in the scale as long as the chord progression is harmonic. So in this case, what I did was I actually did a tritone substitution on the 6, and then in this one I did not. So we're going to talk about both and kind of see how they both sound. So this one is slightly different from this one, and we'll talk about it in a second, so that way I can kind of show you how to get more interesting elements out of your chord progressions. So what's going on? Why do these two chord progressions sound really different? Well, the first thing, as I already said, the 6 has been tritone substituted out. So on the first one, this is my tritone sub. On the second one over here, there's no tritone sub. So this is just a normal 6. The next thing as well is that I've added this passing chord. So if you don't know about passing chords, you're unfamiliar with them, I have a whole tutorial actually on them. You can check it out. It's actually going to be above as well. And so that way you can kind of find out about those. But basically what it is I went to the dominant of the chord in front of it. So the chord in front of this chord here is this G major, is this G major 7. And the dominant of the G major 7 scale is this this D major chord. So that's why this D major chord is here. Even though it's not in the C major scale, it's allowed to be because it is actually resolving correctly in the chord progression. And then obviously I have the G going to the 1. And this one, all I have is just the normal 6. And then I have the passing again to the G major chord, but now I have a tritone substitution for the 5. So I've tritone substituted the 5 out for this D flat 7. So that's how I get this chord progression here. Technically, I actually feel like you should do look at the dominant of that scale. So it's probably a little bit incorrect, but it sounded fine. So hey, it's music. As long as it sounds fine, it is fine. So that's the two things you want to keep in mind when making tritone substitutions is that using them correctly and also using them minimally. With tritone subs, you don't want to have a chord progression that has like 8 of them. You want a chord progression that has like a 1 or 2, because the whole point of the tritone substitution is to make the chord very tense. And as we know, the 5 or dominant of any given scale is already tense. So when you tritone substitute it out, it becomes even more tense. And so if you have so much tenseness in a chord progression, it's going to sound very it's not gonna resolve fully. So I wouldn't use a ton of them, usually using them very minimally. A lot less is a lot more in this case. So that pretty much ends this section, and yeah. So next thing I'm going to talk about is actually going to be passing tritone substitutions. So as you know, we can pass 2 5-1s, we can pass 5s, we can technically pass 6 2s, blah, blah, blah. But the main idea is that now you can tritone substitution those out. So for example, I have a chord progression in front of me, which is this one right here. This is going to be the one that has the tritone substitution passed. If you know what a passing chord is, I actually have a tutorial I'm going to show above. I would definitely check that out. It's going to explain it pretty much fully. I'm not going to cover this tutorial because it's going to kind of make it too long. But anyways, just to kind of give you a sound or an idea of what a passing chord sounds like, I'm going to play a C major chord followed by a D major chord into a G major chord. And as you know, the D major chord is not in the C major scale, the D minor chord is. So when I'm doing it, I'm actually passing to the 5. So anyways, let's give it a quick listen, give you an idea what it sounds like. So as you can see, the chord that is the pass chord is actually this chord here from the C. So that chord, which is the D major chord, is giving a different flavor to the chord progression that wasn't there originally. It gives it almost an ambiguity. It doesn't sound super bright, it doesn't sound super sad, which is a major element or part of passing chords, is that they're super ambiguous. They don't allude to a major or minor scale or to a happy or sadness. They're just kind of ambiguous. You gotta think of them as like hyper mellow. But anyways, so let's go and play this chord progression so where you can hear how passing a 2 5-1, or in this case, I'm passing actually the 2 adds a lot. So anyways, let's go and have a listen. So as you can hear, this chord here, this is the passed chord, because I can see out of this whole chord progression, the only one that's not in key is actually this chord, and this one as well, because I'm doing a tritone substitution of the sixth. So I'm doing a couple things. So the first chord is actually a tritone substitution of the sixth. Then I'm passing to the G major chord, and that passed chord, which is the D major chord, is actually being tritone subbed. So that's how I got this chord progression, which is rather unique. And it gives a super unique feel to your chord progressions that you wouldn't be so familiar with, which is really nice. And also the main thing as well is that this is still in C major. I had a couple questions last tutorial that was asking about, since you're doing all these substitutions and added extra notes, are you still in the C major scale? And yes, you are. All you're doing is subbing out temporarily. But abundantly, you're still in the scale. So when you have like your auto tune and stuff, you may have to adjust it slightly, but more than likely, you'll be fine. I haven't personally had any issues. So anyways, so passing 2-5-1s is very, very just amazing. I would suggest using the passing chord very commonly. They use it a lot in jazz. Also, they use it a lot in like 80s music. So, and if you like kind of the way 80s chord progressions sound, a lot of them have a lot of passing and sustained chords. Suspended chords. And those is that's what gives the sense of airiness or breathness or openness or ambiguity to 80s soundtracks, as well as kind of jazz instrumentation. Like Trippy's new album has a whole bunch of suspended chords and 2-5-1 chord progressions, or even Tyler Creator's board from Flower Boy also has is just a 2-5-1 chord progression. So I would heavily suggest using them, and that's going to allow 2 chord progressions and make them just super, super unique and different and make you really stand out. Because a lot of music, besides just sound design, is actually the way you make your melodies and chords. That's kind of how another way how people identify you. But anyways, hope you guys enjoyed this section, and yeah. The last thing I'm going to talk about is actually just going to be just kind of helpful tips for chord progressions, because I got a lot of questions on them. So the first thing, I can't really stress this enough, is voice leading. Make sure that your chords are, there's as little movement as possible between chords. So if you don't know really how to make chords have little movement between them, your best friend is just using inversions. Inversions really, really allow you to space out chords or move them close together. Because the closer they are together, the less movement there is, the more smooth they're going to sound. When you have big jumps, it's going to sound too sporadic and it's going to be too unpredictable to like people that are listening. Another thing is that using passing chords or suspended chords, and using them quite often, because that's what's going to give your chords more ambiguity to them than they would have normally. For instance, if you play like a 6-2-5-1, like in this tutorial, you can play it normally, or just suspending one of the chords temporarily and then going into the chord is going to give your chord progression more nuance. It's going to make it seem like there's much more to it than there really is. And it's a very kind of cheap, easy method, because all you have to do is literally just move up or down a whole step, and then you have a whole new sort of sound to your chord progression. The next thing is actually passing chords and passing structures of chords. So for instance, instead of just playing the 2-5-1, normally play your 2-5-1 but pass the 2-5-1. And that way you have a more unique chord progression, because you're adding a ton more elements in and getting a lot more chords that were not originally in the normal chord progression. So that way you can flesh it out a lot more. Another thing as well is actually passing with tritones. Pass with tritones, and that way you can get an even more unique sound and have your chord progression be much more unpredictable and unique, because you definitely want to add a lot more color or variety to chord progressions, because playing a standard chord progression, although it works, sometimes can lead to your chord progression throughout a song sounding very redundant or ununique. So having things that kind of pop out to the listener really helps it a lot. And then also using them, frequently but not abundantly. You want still a majority of your chord progression to be standard. So you want to mix them together, kind of like, think of it kind of like an 80-30. 80% of your chord progression is just the standard chord progression, and 30% or 20% it's just going to be stuff thrown on top to kind of spice it up. So generally what I would do is I write a super basic chord progression, and then after the super basic one, I will just, slice, add some suspended or passing chords and so forth and so on, just to kind of spice it up a little bit throughout the song. So that way the listener doesn't get bored listening to the kind of the same tedious chord progression. Or even if you make a really strong chord progression, make sure that it's long, so that way the listener can, obviously be phrased properly to the listener, and at the same time there's still nuance to it. So using both together really helps to give you kind of a sense of like an overarching or expanding chord progression. And another thing is actually changing the chord progression throughout your tune. Don't just have it be the same thing. You can, but generally changing it up once or twice, or even if you don't change the chord progression, just change up a single element in the chord progression every now and then. So that way, once again, the listener doesn't get bored. Because that's the thing. One thing you don't want is it to sound like your song is looping when it really shouldn't sound like it's looping. So that's just kind of things I found out kind of through doing a lot of chord progression stuff. Yeah, definitely look into passing chords and tritones, and hope you guys enjoy this tutorial so far. Yo, and that pretty much ends it for the tutorial today, guys. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe, smash the like button. Definitely let me know in the comments if you liked the video. Also, if you haven't already, you can definitely follow me online on Instagram at Laghima 101. So check me out. I post new content every day, some cool analog content and just analog equipment. If you guys want the music through the video, just let me know. I saw in the comments people want one like future bass. Definitely wanted to do one. I saw it. I'm definitely reading all the comments, guys. I appreciate everybody commenting in the last video. Awesome, you guys support. Also, welcome to all the fucking new subs, because I know there's a ton of us now. It's like almost a K. So yeah, we're gonna be at a K soon, guys. When we get there, there'll be a whole bunch of other new stuff I'm gonna talk about soon. But anyways, guys, hope you guys enjoy the video. See you guys next time.